This is the Ford Mustang Mach-E, and we're not going to talk about whether or not it should have a Mustang badge on it. That's for a separate debate. This is the rear wheel drive version, the extended range. It's got a 91 kilowatt hour usable battery and a supposed WLTP range of 610 kilometers. Now, we've already reviewed this car on the channel before, and we've also got a full article up on our website about it, so this isn't going to be a review today. We have the car again for the second time, so what we want to do with it is just really see what it's like to live with it. We're going to do a full week driving around, dropping kids to school. We have got the commute into work and back, going to rack up a few hundred kilometers and see if it's worth the hefty price tag. Despite the bulk of the car, it's actually got quite a small boot at 322 litres. Now, you can fold down the back seats in a 60-40 split. That goes out to about 1400 litres. But still, for a car this size, and if you want to use it for a family car where you're trying to lump in a couple of buggies and things like that, you might struggle a little bit. Now, you do have the frunk, and that is a very impressive 100 litres. So overall, space goes out to something that's quite decent. But still, yeah, just a little bit let down on that now. For me, this is the sweet spot here. It's the 18-inch alloys, and they're on big squishy tires as well. Great for just taking in those tiny little bumps and imperfections in the road. Evens out a little bit of the joltiness when you go over ramps and stuff like that. And I like the way the suspension is set up because it's quite comfortable. There's enough firmness there that when you're throwing it into a few little corners and you're having a spirited drive, that every once in a while you want to just enjoy yourself a little bit. It'll take that, it'll handle well thanks to the low center of gravity from the battery down there. But just on day-to-day driving, ramps and housing estates, those little bumps in the road, really, really comfortable. Couple that with the sound insulation in the cabin and it's just quite comfortable to drive. This is where you charge the Mach-E, and my experience this week with it is that I haven't had to use it at all. The car's got so much range. I'm tracking for about 550 kilometers off this charge that I haven't needed it. But let's say I did turn up at home at 8 p.m. on 1% battery. I'd plug it in, and by the time I'd leave at 6 a.m. the next morning, it's still going to be pretty much full. So DC socket just there as well, and a little half-an-hour stop on the motorway, and you'll get anywhere in the country from anywhere else in the country thanks to the very, very significant range of the Mach-E. Now, we're not going to go through all the features in the cabin here because, as I said, we've got a full review up on the YouTube channel and on our website as well. So I just want to mention a few things that I've noticed and that has kind of impacted on my impressions as I've used this car throughout the week, both for commuting and dropping the kids off and all that. So let's start off just down here. A little bit unimpressed by the gear selector. I don't know, is it a tiny bit cheap or it's just sitting there on its own? But it does work absolutely fine. Put it into neutral. You do have to have a quick look down just to make sure you've put it into reverse if you're doing a 3-point turn or something like that. But you do get used to it. I love this huge screen here. Now, on a lot of cars that I've driven, they do have a touch screen, but just the buttons are a little bit smaller. It's a little bit finicky. It's a little bit slower. Ford seem to have gotten how to execute this. Is it up there with Tesla? Well, it's different now in many ways, but it's very, very impressive. Big buttons, easy to use, easy to navigate as well. It's quick enough and everything that you want is there. Now, phone I have plugged in at the moment to charge it up, but it does have a wireless charging pad down here. It's got Android Auto, wireless as well. So really, really good functionality in that sense. I like that there's a rotary knob there for volume controls, and you've got your heating functions down the bottom and they're permanently there. So if you want your heated steering wheel or seats or control the aircon or anything like that, and it is dual zone, you get that there straight away. And as you're sitting here driving along, it doesn't take much just to press the couple of buttons. You do get quite used to it. We have one of the slower of the Mustangs with us in the rear wheel drive one, but it's still got about 300 horsepower, just under 300 horsepower. And that is absolutely plenty. Now, in the world of electric vehicles at the moment, it's not bonkers fast at all. But anybody who's used to a 2.5 litre diesel SUV this kind of size will be really impressed with the speed. And it gets you moving off the line. It's a slightly slower transition at the start. That throttle mapping doesn't give you all the power straight away, but it is a nice release up to speed. And then when you're merging on motorways and stuff like that, it's got plenty of power there for you. You really don't need any more than this. There's already plenty here. The panoramic roof is absolutely great just for letting in light. It really does feel airy in here. And it's a nice contrast because the materials are quite dark on the spec that we have here today, but it doesn't feel gloomy like it does in some other cars because of that roof just there. plenty of head height, and yeah, I like it. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of SUVs, I just find them unnecessarily bulky. This one finds that nice little balance as you go past a saloon or an estate. We are up in the twisty mountain roads of the Wicklow Mountains here, just to give this a little bit of a test and a feel on those kind of narrower, more twisty roads. And it does quite well, considering the bulk and its size. You do have that battery down nice and low. Centre of gravity is down low, so when you're putting it into corners, it doesn't roll around at all. And this comes back to the way the suspension is set up, which I quite like. It's not as firm as it needs to be really sporty, but that's okay, we're not looking for that. But it is firm enough that once you are throwing it around a little bit like this, that it feels tidy enough. Now, of course, it's going to be well beaten by, you know, a Polestar 2 or a Model 3, a 3/4 Series BMW, things like that, of course. But for an SUV that's 2.1 tons, feels very solid. The range on the Mustang is quite impressive, and I'm very pleasantly surprised by it. I'd heard a couple of people who had driven it already just saying that, you know, 610 kilometers WLTP range, and you'll never get anywhere close to that. And I don't know if I fully agree, because I've had this car now for a week. I barely managed to get through the battery in that time. So if we work out, the average efficiency that I've been getting is 16 kilowatt hours for every 100 kilometers I drive. And if you extrapolate that out with the size of battery, I'm on track for about 565, 570 kilometers. And I haven't been hypermiling it either. Weather's been kind of decent, you know, in somewhere between 5 and 15 degrees Celsius. So I think if you treat this thing carefully, it's a solid 450 to 500 kilometer range car. Be really careful with it. You'll crack that 600, 620 out of it. But then even on a motorway in winter, you're still getting at least a 300 out of it, you know. It's I think this does a little bit better than some people give it credit for. Another thing that I really like about the Mustang is the regen braking. As you're driving these cars week in, week out, you start to get a feel for the intricacies of each one, in electric cars that is, and this is one of my favourites. It's got quite strong regen, which is very, very welcome. So let's see, we're just going to overtake a cyclist here. There's space, yeah, there we go. And we're coming up to a bend here, so we're at 65. I take my foot off, 60, 50, 40. There we go. So there, it's quite firm regen, which is great. It means that you hardly ever have to use the brake pedal. And also it's one pedal driving. So if I left my foot off there, it would just bring me all the way down to 0, and it would hold that as well. So if you're on a hill or something like that, you still don't need to press the brake. The car will just automatically hold you. And it makes driving, just pottering around, the day-to-day kind of driving that we all do, just dropping kids to creche or going to work, especially in traffic and, you know, bendy roads where you have to accelerate and slow down a lot.
Turn right onto Kilgob.
Thank you very much. It just makes driving, day-to-day driving, living with a car like this so much easier. I've come to the motorway now, so we're moving around the M50 just because there's a couple of features I want to talk about, and for me this is where the Mustang is just brilliant. Sound insulation is really, really good. It's nice and quiet in here thanks to those slightly smaller tire wheels, slightly squishy tires. It just takes all those little imperfections done really, really well. Very, very comfortable and just floats along. Adaptive cruise control, so we've just come up behind a truck here and it's just slowed me down to 80 nice and smoothly. No hassle, no jerkiness, hasn't jammed on friction brakes or anything like that. It's really, really smooth. And also the car will steer for you. Now, if I take my hands away from the steering wheel for anything more than a few seconds, it will start beeping at me because you're not supposed to do that. But I'm not controlling the car here. It's following a truck in front of me and a relatively sharp bend in the M50 around to the right. And we've just gone past a couple of junctions there where cars have been merging, and the lane discipline is absolutely superb. Sometimes when that lane demarcation on the left or the right hand runs out, the car just freaks out a little bit on some systems, but this one is so composed and solid, and it really is very, very impressive. We really have enjoyed our time with the Mustang Mach-E over the week that we've had it, and we've put up a few hundred kilometres on it in all types of conditions, from commuting down the M1 at 6 o'clock in the morning down into Dublin on the way to work and dropping the kids to creche and things like that. And the more I drove it, the more I liked it. I just settled into it really, really well. That adaptive cruise control is just brilliant, one of the best I've ever driven. It's a really comfortable car overall. Space in the back, yeah, not great, but to be honest, if you don't desperately need it, then it doesn't really matter. You've still got about 450 litres overall between the frunk and the back, which is plenty for most people. For me, the issue kind of arises when we start talking about price. Those that are conscious of price are going to find much better value out there, you know, the MGZ SEV, or even with the recent price drops, the Tesla Model Y, good 25 grand cheaper than what we have here on test today, which is 79,000 euros. But if you do have that kind of money to spend, you have to look at this, because it really, really is an impressive machine. And you know what? It's one of my favorite cars that I've driven in the last couple of years.